The chamber was silent, save for the faint hum of the crystal spires that pulsed with the lifeblood of Zarathus. The elders stood in a semicircle, their translucent robes shimmering faintly under the dim violet glow. Their faces, ancient, weathered by millennia of wisdom, were taut with something rare for their kind. Fear. High Elder Corin's voice trembled as he spoke, each word a heavy stone dropped into the stillness. We warned them. We warned the Council, the fleets, the entire Galactic Assembly. Humans are not like the others. They are relentless, unstoppable. And now it is too late. No one answered. The younger initiates, standing at the edges of the chamber, shifted uneasily. They'd grown up on tales of the elders' foresight, their ability to see the threads of fate weaving through the stars. But this was different. The humans were a fledgling species, barely a speck on the galactic map. How could they unravel everything the Zarathian Dominion had built over eons? The initiates exchanged glances, their glowing eyes flickering with doubt. They hadn't seen what the elders had seen. They hadn't felt the shiver in the void when the first human ships broke free of their cradle world. Corin's gaze drifted to the holosphere at the center of the chamber. With a wave of his skeletal hand, it flared to life, projecting a scene that made even the boldest among them recoil. A human vessel, small, crude, patched together with materials the galaxy had long since abandoned, drifted through the wreckage of a Dominion warship. The warship had been a marvel of engineering, its hull forged from star steel, its weapons capable of cracking moons. Now it was a husk, torn open like a beast felled by a hunter's blade. And there, among the debris, the human ship lingered, its crew scavenging, undeterred by the destruction they'd wrought. They do not tire, Corin said, his voice barely above a whisper. They do not yield. We struck their colonies, burned their skies, shattered their fleets, and still they came. More ships, more warriors, more defiance. He paused, his breath catching as the holosphere shifted to show a human soldier, bloodied, armor cracked, standing atop a mound of fallen Zarathian drones. The soldier raised a fist, shouting something the elders couldn't hear, but the gesture alone sent a chill through the room. It was triumph. Raw, unbridled triumph. Elder Vera stepped forward, her voice sharp with frustration. We told the Council to leave them be. We begged them to quarantine that wretched system, to let the humans claw at their dirt and die out in obscurity. But no, they wanted resources. They wanted slaves. They thought a primitive species could be broken. She laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off the spires. And now the Council's fleets are ash, their worlds are burning, and the humans are at our gates. The initiates murmured among themselves, their doubt giving way to unease. They'd heard the rumors, whispers of human resilience, of battles where the odds should have crushed them but didn't. There was the tale of Tarvox Prime, where a single human outpost held off a siege for 3 cycles, long after their supplies ran dry. Or the massacre at Kelrin's Belt, where a human captain rammed his dying ship into a Dominion dreadnought, taking both to oblivion in a blaze of fire and spite. The stories were dismissed as exaggerations, propaganda from a desperate foe. But the holosphere didn't lie. The elders didn't lie. Corin turned to the initiates, his eyes burning with an intensity that silenced their whispers. You think this is a war of weapons, of strategy? Number this is a war of will. The humans have something we lost long ago, something we buried beneath our towers and our laws. They hunger, not for power, not for glory, but for survival, and that hunger makes them unbreakable. One of the initiates, a young female named Silith, stepped forward. Her voice was soft but steady, cutting through the tension. If they're so unstoppable, Why do we still fight? Why not negotiate, offer peace? The question hung in the air, naive yet piercing. The elders exchanged glances, their silence heavier than before. Vera answered, her tone laced with regret. Because they don't trust us. We struck first. We glassed their cities, slaughtered their young, all in the name of dominance. They see us as monsters now. And they're right to. Peace was never an option after what we did. The holosphere flickered again, this time showing a human fleet, hundreds of ships, mismatched and scarred, emerging from the void. They moved with no discernible formation, no elegance, just a chaotic swarm bearing down on Zarathus's outer defenses. Alarms blared in the distance, faint but growing louder. The initiates froze, their glowing eyes wide with realization. The humans weren't coming. They were already here. Corin closed his eyes, his voice a broken murmur. We warned them. No one listened. And now, we pay the price. The alarms grew louder, a shrieking chorus that reverberated through the crystal spires of Zarathus. The chamber trembled, dust sifting from the ceiling as the first distant booms echoed beyond the walls. The initiates stumbled, clutching at one another, their glowing eyes darting toward the elders for reassurance that never came. Corin stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the holosphere as it tracked the human fleet's advance. The swarm of ships moved like a living thing, erratic, unpredictable, splitting apart and reforming with a ferocity that defied reason. Dominion interceptors raced to meet them, sleek and precise, but they were swallowed one by one, devoured by the humans' relentless tide. Vera's hands clenched into fists, her voice cutting through the chaos. They fight like animals, wild, desperate, with no regard for their own lives. How do you stop a foe that welcomes death? She turned to Corin, her frustration boiling over. We should have fled, High Elder. We should have abandoned this system when we had the chance. Pride has doomed us. Corin's response was slow, deliberate, as if each word cost him something vital. Flee where, Vera? To the outer rims? To the dead zones? They'd follow? They always follow. You've seen their kind, wounded, starving, pushed to the edge of extinction, and still they rise. No corner of the galaxy is safe from them now. The holosphere shifted, zooming in on a single human ship at the forefront of the swarm. It was larger than the others, its hull a patchwork of salvaged metal and Dominion wreckage, bristling with makeshift weapons. A name was scrawled across its side in jagged crimson letters. Unbroken. The sight sent a ripple of dread through the chamber. That ship had become a legend among the Zarathians, whispered about in the aftermath of every lost battle. It was said to carry a crew of survivors from Earth's first colonies, the ones the Dominion had raised in their opening salvo, survivors who'd sworn vengeance, who'd rebuilt their shattered lives into a weapon aimed at Zarathus's heart. Silith, the young initiate who'd dared to speak earlier, stepped closer to the holosphere, her voice trembling but defiant. If they're so driven by revenge, why not use it against them? Draw them into a trap. Let their anger blind them. We're smarter than they are. Surely we can outthink them. Vera snorted, a harsh sound that carried no humor. Smarter? Perhaps once. But they've learned, Silith. Every defeat we've handed them, every trap we've set, they adapt. They turn our own tactics against us. At Krenva's Reach, we lured them into an asteroid field, primed it with fusion mines. They lost half their fleet, and then they used the debris as cover to board our ships. By the end, our own commanders were begging for mercy. The memory hung heavy in the air. Krenva's Reach had been a turning point, a humiliation that shattered the Dominion's illusion of invincibility. The humans hadn't just survived. They'd thrived in the chaos, their soldiers fighting hand to hand in the corridors of Zarathian vessels, their screams echoing through comms until the lines went silent. The elders had watched the recordings in stunned disbelief. Humans with broken limbs still swinging, humans bleeding out but refusing to fall, humans who laughed as they died, dragging their enemies with them. A sudden jolt rocked the chamber, the spires swaying as a deep, guttural roar tore through the sky. The holosphere flickered, then stabilized, revealing a new image. A human drop pod crashing through Zarathus's outer shield, its hull glowing red from atmospheric entry. It struck the surface with a plume of fire and dust, and within moments figures emerged, armored, relentless, moving with purpose toward the capital. The initiates gasped, some collapsing to their knees. The humans weren't just at the gates anymore. They were inside. Corin's voice broke the stunned silence, low and resigned. They don't need fleets to win. They don't need numbers. One human, given a chance, can undo us all. We thought them weak because they bleed, because they die. But it's their mortality that fuels them. They know their time is short, so they burn brighter than we ever could. Vera whirled on him, her eyes blazing. Then what do we do, Corin? Stand here and wait for the end? Preach philosophy while they carve us apart? Her words were a challenge, but beneath them lay a plea, a desperate hope that the High Elder had some answer, some miracle to pull from the ashes. Before Corin could respond, the chamber doors burst open and a breathless soldier stumbled in, his armor cracked and smeared with violet blood. High Elder, they've breached the lower districts. They're moving fast, cutting through our lines like nothing I've ever seen. They're chanting something, for Earth, for the fallen. It's driving them mad, unstoppable. The soldier's words dissolved into a sob, and the chamber erupted into chaos. Initiates screamed, elders shouted orders, and the holosphere flared with static as more drop pods rained from the sky. Silith stood frozen, staring at the soldier, then at the elders, her naive hope crumbling. The humans weren't just a threat. They were a force of nature, a reckoning born from the Dominion's own arrogance. Corin raised a hand, silencing the room. His voice was steady now, carrying a weight that stilled even the soldiers trembling. Gather the council, arm the reserves. We fight, not because we can win, but because we must. They'll take Zarathus, but they'll pay for every step in blood. As the chamber emptied, the holosphere lingered on the unbroken, its crimson name a scar against the stars. The humans were here, and they weren't stopping. Not now. Not ever. The streets of Zarathus burned, smoke coiled upward in thick, choking tendrils, staining the violet sky with streaks of black. The capital's spires, once symbols of eternal dominion, loomed like broken sentinels over a city unraveling at its seams. The humans moved through the lower districts with a ferocity that defied comprehension. Small bands of soldiers, ragged and bloodied, cutting through Zarathian defenses like a blade through silk. Their weapons were crude, their armor patched together from scavenged parts, but their eyes blazed with something the Zarathians had never understood. Purpose. In the war room beneath the high spire, Corin stood over a tactical grid, its flickering lights painting his gaunt face in shades of red and blue. The council had assembled, 7 elders, their robes tattered, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of desperation. The grid showed the humans advancing block by block, their chaotic movements somehow outpacing every countermeasure the Dominion threw at them. Drones fell from the sky in droves, shredded by human explosives. Ground troops vanished under waves of gunfire and steel, and still, the invaders pressed forward, their numbers seemingly endless despite the bodies piling in their wake. Vera paced behind Corin, her hands trembling with barely contained rage. We've lost the southern quadrant. The shield generators are offline. They blew them apart with their own ships, ramming them like beasts. Who does that? Who sacrifices their own just to wound us?" Her voice cracked, the weight of their failure pressing down on her. She'd spent centuries honing strategies, commanding fleets, believing the Dominion's intellect could crush any foe. Now she watched it all crumble against an enemy that didn't care about logic or loss. Corin didn't look up from the grid. His fingers traced a line where a human unit had broken through the eastern barricade, their path marked by flickering red dots. Fallen Zarathian soldiers. "They do it because they have nothing left to lose," he said quietly. "We took their homes, their kin, their future. What's a ship or a life when all you have is vengeance?" A young counselor, Terran, slammed his fist against the table, his glowing eyes wild with panic. "Then why didn't we finish them? When we had the chance, why didn't we burn their world to cinders and be done with it? This half measure, it's why they're here now." His words were a snarl, but beneath them lay a tremor of guilt. Terran had been among those who'd voted for the initial strikes, who'd laughed at the idea of humans posing a threat. Now he stood in a room drowning in the consequences. Vera rounded on him, her voice a whip crack. "Because we thought them beneath us, Terran. We wanted their labor, their resources, not their extinction. We thought we could leash them, break their spirits. Instead, we lit a fire we can't put out." She gestured to the grid, where another cluster of Zarathian defenses blinked out. "Look at them. Do they seem broken to you?" Before Terran could retort, a low rumble shook the war room, the walls groaning as dust rained from the ceiling. The grid flared with static, then refocused on a live feed from the eastern front. A human figure stood atop a shattered barricade, silhouetted against the flames. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his armor dented and smeared with violet blood. In one hand, he held a jagged blade. In the other, a tattered flag bearing a blue and green sphere. Earth. Behind him, more humans emerged from the smoke, their voices rising in a chant that carried even through the feed. "For Earth! For the fallen!" Silith, who'd followed the elders from the chamber, stood at the edge of the room, her breath catching as she watched. She'd trained her whole life to serve the Dominion, to uphold its order, its perfection. But this was chaos incarnate, a force that didn't bend to reason or mercy. She whispered almost to herself, "They're not fighting for victory. They're fighting for something else, something we don't have." Corin glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "They fight for memory," he said, "for every soul we took from them. That's why they won't stop. That's why they can't." The feed shifted again, showing a closer view of the human leader. His face was scarred, one eye hidden beneath a crude patch, but his gaze burned with an intensity that made even Vera falter. He raised the flag higher, shouting words the Zarathians couldn't translate, and his soldiers roared in response, surging forward into the next line of defenses. Plasma bolts lit the air, drones swooped down, but the humans didn't falter. They climbed over their own dead, using the bodies as shields, their advance unbroken. A soldier burst into the war room, his armor scorched, his voice hoarse. "They've reached the mid-tier! The reserves are falling! They're cutting through us too fast! We can't hold them!" He collapsed, gasping, and the counselors erupted into shouts, some calling for evacuation, others for a final stand. Corin raised a hand, silencing them once more. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of inevitability. "Send the signal. Activate the core defenses. If they want Zarathus, they'll bleed for it. Every step, every breath, they'll pay." Vera stared at him, her anger giving way to something colder. "And us? What do we pay, Corin? For starting this?" He didn't answer. The grid pulsed red as the humans drew closer, their chant echoing through the feed, a promise and a curse woven into every word. The elders had warned them, no one had listened. And now the reckoning was here. The core defenses roared to life, a deep thrumming that shook the foundations of Zarathus. Beneath the high spire, ancient mechanisms, forged in an era when the Dominion still fought its wars with blood and steel, awoke from their slumber. Massive turrets rose from the earth, their barrels glowing with the violet fire of plasma coils. Shield walls snapped into place, shimmering barriers that split the mid-tier districts into a labyrinth of death. For a moment, the war room held its breath, the tactical grid showing a flicker of hope as the human advance slowed against the onslaught. Corin watched the grid, his skeletal hands clasped behind his back. The red dots marking the humans pulsed erratically. Some winked out, consumed by the turret's barrages, but others pressed forward, weaving through the chaos with a tenacity that bordered on madness. He could hear their distant shouts through the feed, muffled but unrelenting. For Earth, for the fallen. Each word was a hammer against the Zarathians' fragile morale, a reminder of the sins that had brought this storm to their doorstep. Vera stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the flickering shield readings. "It's working," she muttered, almost disbelieving. "The core lines are holding. They're dying out there. Maybe we can push them back." Her voice trembled with a desperate edge, clinging to the possibility of survival. She'd seen too many battles lost, too many comrades fall to fully trust the moment. But the grid didn't lie, not yet. Silith lingered near the soldier who'd collapsed, tending to his wounds with shaking hands. His breaths were shallow, his armor cracked open like an eggshell, but he grabbed her wrist, his voice a rasp. "You don't get it. They're not dying, not enough. I saw them, crawling, bleeding, still fighting. One of them took a plasma bolt to the chest and kept coming, kept swinging till I cut him down myself." He coughed, violet blood flecking his lips. "They're not like us. They don't stop." Her glowing eyes widened, the soldier's words sinking into her like a blade. She glanced at the grid, where the human dots were indeed thinning, but not vanishing. They shifted, adapted, splitting into smaller groups that darted through gaps in the shield walls, exploiting every weakness with a speed that defied their losses. She whispered, "How do they do it? How do they keep going?" Corin heard her, though he didn't turn. "Because they believe," he said, his tone heavy with something like awe. "We fight for order, for legacy. They fight for something rawer, something we stamped out of ourselves long ago. Faith, rage, love, it's all the same to them now, fused into a fire we can't quench." A sudden crack split the air, the war room trembling as the grid flared with warnings. One of the shield walls had fallen, blown apart by a human explosive, its wreckage raining down on the defenders below. The feed snapped to the breach, revealing a scene that silenced even Vera's fragile hope. A human woman, her armor scorched and one arm hanging limp, stood amid the rubble, a detonator clutched in her remaining hand. Behind her, her squad poured through the gap, their weapons blazing as they carved a path deeper into the city. She staggered, blood streaming from a gash across her face, but her lips moved in a silent chant, for Earth, for the fallen, before she collapsed, her sacrifice complete. Terran stumbled back from the grid, his voice a broken cry. "They're insane! They throw themselves at us like it's nothing. What are we supposed to do against that?" His earlier bravado was gone, replaced by a terror that mirrored the soldier's haunted stare. The counselors murmured among themselves, some clutching their robes, others staring blankly at the feed as the humans surged closer. Vera's hands balled into fists, her nails digging into her palms. "We kill them," she snarled. "Every last one. If they want to die for their dirtball planet, we'll give them what they want." But her words rang hollow, undercut by the tremor in her voice. She knew, they all knew, that the humans weren't just dying. They were winning. The grid pulsed again, showing the Unbroken descending through the atmosphere, its jagged hull cutting through the smoke like a predator's claw. It didn't fire, didn't engage, just hovered, a silent promise of what was to come. The sight broke something in the room. A counselor sobbed. Another fled toward the door, only to be dragged back by Silith, who shouted, "We can't run, not now." Corin finally turned from the grid, his eyes meeting hers. "No," he agreed, his voice steady but laced with sorrow. "We can't run, but we can't win either, not like this." He gestured to the soldier, then to the feed. "They've already paid more than we ever could, and they're still coming." The turrets fired again, their violet light painting the sky, but the human dots kept moving. Fewer now, but no less determined. The Unbroken loomed larger, its shadow falling over the high spire. The war room fell silent, save for the soldiers' ragged breaths and the distant, unstoppable chant. The elders had warned them. No one had listened. And now the humans were at their throats. The shadow of the Unbroken stretched across the high spire, a dark stain that swallowed the violet glow of the crystal towers. From the war room, the elders could feel its presence, a weight pressing down on their chests, as if the ship itself were a living thing, hungry and inevitable. The tactical grid flickered, its lights dimming as power faltered across the city. The core defenses still blazed, tearing into the human ranks below, but the red dots kept creeping forward, relentless as a rising tide. The turrets' roars were drowned out by the chant echoing through the streets. For Earth, for the fallen. It wasn't just a battle cry anymore. It was a heartbeat, pulsing through the bones of Zarathus. Corin stood at the grid, his composure cracking at last. His hands trembled as he traced the human's path, now less than a kilometer from the spire's base. "They're too close," he murmured, almost to himself. "The reserves are gone. The mid-tier is lost. How do they still have so many?" His voice carried a quiet disbelief, as if the numbers defied not just strategy but reality itself. He'd seen wars before, centuries of them, but nothing like this. Nothing that gnawed at the soul as much as the body. Vera slammed her fist against the console, the impact jarring the grid's display. "Because they don't care," she shouted, her voice raw with exhaustion and fury. "They don't count their dead. They don't mourn. They just keep coming. We've killed thousands, Corin, thousands, and it's not enough." She gestured to the feed, where human soldiers clambered over the wreckage of a fallen turret, their armor riddled with holes, their faces smeared with blood and ash. One of them, a young man with wild eyes, dragged a wounded comrade forward, firing with one hand while the other gripped his brother in arms. They didn't stop. They didn't falter. Silith knelt beside the wounded soldier, her hands stained with his violet blood as she tried to staunch his wounds. He was fading, his breaths shallow, but his eyes locked onto hers with a desperate clarity. "I saw their leader," he rasped. "The one with the flag. Scarred face, one eye. He walked through the fire. Didn't flinch. They follow him like he's more than human, like he's their soul." He coughed, choking on the words, then went still. Silith stared at him, her hands frozen, the weight of his final breath sinking into her. The feed crackled, shifting to a new angle. The base of the spire, where the scarred human leader stood amidst the chaos. His flag was planted in the ground, its tattered edges snapping in the wind as plasma bolts streaked past. He barked orders, his voice a gravelly roar that cut through the din, and his soldiers obeyed without hesitation. They formed a ragged line, shielding him as they advanced, their bodies falling one by one to protect their commander. He didn't waver, didn't glance at the dead. Just kept moving, his single eye fixed on the spire like it was the only thing left in the universe. Taran, the young counselor, sank into a chair, his hands clawing at his face. "We're done," he whispered. "They'll tear us apart, piece by piece, and there's nothing we can do. We should have listened. We should have—" His voice broke into a sob, and the other counselors turned away, their own resolve fraying. One of them, an older female named Lyrith, muttered a prayer to gods the Dominion had long since abandoned, her words trembling in the air. Vera whirled on Corin, her eyes blazing with a mix of defiance and despair. "We can't just wait here. Activate the spire's failsafe. Detonate the core. If they want Zarathus, let them choke on the ashes." Her suggestion hung like a blade, sharp and final. The failsafe was a last resort, a fusion cascade that would obliterate the capital and everything within 100 kilometers. It was suicide, but it might take the humans with them. Corin's gaze shifted to her, heavy with the burden of centuries. "And what then, Vera? We die, they die, and the rest of their kind come for what's left. You think this ends with us? This is their vengeance, not their victory. More will rise." He shook his head, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. "We lit this fire. We don't get to choose how it burns." Before Vera could argue, the war room shuddered, a deep crack splitting the ceiling. Dust and debris rained down, and the grid went dark for a moment before flickering back to life. The humans were at the spire's gates, battering them with salvaged cannons, their scarred leader at the forefront. He raised his blade, shouting something that rallied his troops into a frenzy, and the gates buckled under the assault. Selith stood, her voice cutting through the panic. "If we can't stop them, we can slow them. Buy time. Get the civilians out. There's still a chance for some of us." Her words were naive, desperate, but they sparked a flicker of purpose in the room. The counselors hesitated, then nodded, grasping at the slim hope she offered. Corin looked at her, then at the feed, where the gates groaned and splintered. "Time," he said softly, "is the one thing they won't give us." The Unbroken rumbled overhead, its shadow deepening, and the chant grew louder, closer, a tide that would drown them all. The gates of the high spire gave way with a scream of twisted metal, the sound echoing through the war room like a death knell. The feed flared with static, then stabilized, showing the humans pouring through the breach, wild, unstoppable, their scarred leader at the helm. His flag whipped in the wind, a banner of defiance stained with the blood of both species, and his soldiers followed him with a fervor that bordered on worship. Plasma bolts lit the air, cutting down dozens, but for every human that fell, 2 more surged forward, their chant. "For Earth! For the fallen!" Ringing louder than the gunfire. Corin stood frozen at the grid, its lights now a chaotic smear of red and fading blue. The spire's inner defenses, automated sentries, energy traps, flared to life, tearing into the invaders with merciless precision, bodies piled at the threshold, a grotesque barricade of flesh and steel, but the humans climbed over their own dead, their hands slick with blood as they clawed their way inside. Corin's voice was a whisper, lost in the chaos. "We built this place to withstand armies, fleets, gods, and they're breaking it with their hands." Vera grabbed his arm, her grip bruising. "We're not done yet. The failsafe. Corin, we have to use it. They're inside. There's no time." Her eyes were wild, her earlier defiance replaced by a raw animal panic. She'd fought too long, lost too much to let it end like this, cornered in a tomb of their own making. The counselors murmured their assent, some nodding frantically, others staring blankly at the feed, as if already resigned to the fire. Selith stepped forward, her voice sharp despite the tremor in her hands. No, the civilians, they're still out there, in the tunnels, the shelters. You'd kill them all just to spite the humans? She pointed to the grid, where faint green dots marked the evacuation routes, thousands of Zarathians fleeing toward the outer districts. We can't abandon them. We can't become what they think we are. Veyra's lip curled, her frustration boiling over. They're already dead, Sylith. You think the humans will stop at the spire? They'll hunt us down, every last one, until there's nothing left. This is our only chance. She turned to Corin, pleading now. High Elder, please, end it. Let us take them with us. Corin's gaze lingered on the feed, where the scarred human leader drove his blade into a sentry's core, sparks flying as it collapsed. The man's face was a mask of rage and sorrow, his single eye burning with a fire that seemed to pierce the screen itself. Corin shook his head slowly. No, Veyra, Sylith's right. We've shed enough blood, ours and theirs. The failsafe stays cold. His voice hardened, a flicker of the authority he'd wielded for centuries. We fight. Here. Now for as long as we can. A tremor rocked the room, the ceiling cracking wider as the Unbroken fired its first salvo. A low, rumbling blast that shook the spire to its roots. Dust choked the air, and the grid flickered out, leaving only the feed's grainy image of the humans storming the lower halls. Their leader roared something unintelligible, and his troops responded with a surge, smashing through barricades with salvaged weapons and bare fists. The Zarathian guards fell back, their lines crumbling under the onslaught. Terran leapt to his feet, his panic erupting into action. I'm not dying here, he shouted, shoving past the counselors toward a side passage. There's a shuttle bay. We can still get out. Lyrith grabbed his arm, her voice a hiss. Coward, you'll lead them right to the survivors. But Terran tore free and ran, his footsteps fading into the dark. Sylith watched him go, then turned to Corin. What now? They're coming. Minutes, maybe less. What do we do? Her words were steady, but her glowing eyes betrayed her fear, her youth stark against the Elder's weathered resolve. Corin drew a breath, then gestured to the soldier's fallen blade, lying near Silith's feet. We arm ourselves. We hold this room. If they want the heart of Zarathus, they'll choke on it. He moved to a wall panel, slamming his palm against it to reveal a cache of weapons. Sleek, ceremonial blades and plasma pistols, relics of a prouder age. The counselors hesitated, then followed, their hands shaking as they armed themselves for a fight they knew they couldn't win. The feed flickered again, showing the scarred leader ascending the spire's central stair, his troops fanning out behind him. Blood dripped from his blade, his armor scorched and dented, but he moved with a purpose that made the air tremble. His chant grew clearer now, carried by the feed's failing audio. For Earth, for the fallen, for every soul you stole. Each word was a wound, a promise, a curse. Veyra clutched a pistol, her voice low. He's their soul, like the soldier said. Cut him down, and maybe they break. But even she didn't believe it, not fully. The humans weren't a machine to be dismantled. They were a storm, and the spire was its eye. The floor shook again, closer now, and the sound of boots echoed through the walls. Corin raised his blade, his voice steady. Stand with me, one last time. The elders formed a ragged line, Sylith at their side, and waited as the storm broke through. The war room's doors buckled, a deafening clang reverberating as the humans hammered against them. Corin stood at the forefront, blade in hand, his ancient frame taut with resolve. Beside him, Veyra gripped her pistol, her breath ragged, while Sylith clutched a dagger, her glowing eyes wide but unyielding. The counselors flanked them, their ceremonial weapons trembling in unsteady hands. The feed had gone dark, but the sound told the story. Boots, shouts, and the relentless chant, "For Earth, for the fallen." The doors burst open, a tide of humans flooding in, their scarred leader at the helm. His one-eyed gaze swept the room, locking onto Corin with a fury that burned through the haze of smoke and dust. His flag dragged behind him, its pole splintered but defiant, and his soldiers fanned out, weapons raised. The Zarathians braced themselves, the air thick with the weight of their end. Vera fired first, her plasma bolt striking a human in the chest. He staggered but didn't fall, lunging forward with a snarl before Sylith's dagger found his throat. The room erupted. Blades clashed, shots rang out, and blood, violet and red, splattered the crystal floor. Corin swung his blade, cutting down a soldier, but another took his place, then another. The humans fought like a swarm, overwhelming through sheer will. The scarred leader charged Corin, his jagged blade meeting the elders with a force that jarred the old man's bones. "You!" the human roared, his voice raw with hate. "You burned our worlds!" Corin parried, stumbling back, his strength fading. "We warned you," he gasped. "You wouldn't listen." The human's eye blazed, and he struck again, driving Corin to his knees. Vera screamed, firing at the leader, but a human tackled her, pinning her down as her shots went wild. Salith fought to reach her, slashing at anything that moved, her cries lost in the chaos. The counselors fell one by one. Lyrith's prayer cut short by a blade, another's skull crushed under a boot. The humans didn't relent, their numbers thinning but their fury unbroken. Corin's blade slipped from his grasp, his vision blurring as the scarred leader loomed over him. "For Earth," the human growled, raising his weapon. Corin met his gaze, a flicker of regret in his ancient eyes. "We made you this," he whispered. The blade fell, and the High Elder crumpled, his blood pooling beneath him. Sylith reached Vera, dragging her free, but the room was a graveyard. Elders dead, humans wounded but standing. The scarred leader planted his flag in the center, his chest heaving, and turned to his troops. "It's ours," he rasped. The chant rose again, weaker now but triumphant. The spire was theirs. The elders had warned them. No one had listened, and now Zarathus belonged to the unstoppable. The war room lay silent, a tomb of shattered crystal and broken bodies. The scarred human leader stood over Corin's corpse, his blade dripping violet blood, his flag staked in the floor like a conqueror's claim. The Unbroken's rumble vibrated through the spire, a distant heartbeat for the humans who'd survived. Their chant had faded, replaced by heavy breaths and the groans of the wounded. Silith and Vera huddled in a corner, the last of the Zarathians, their weapons lost, their hope extinguished. The humans spared them no glance. Victory was theirs, and mercy wasn't part of it. The leader wiped his blade on his tattered sleeve, his one eye scanning the carnage. His soldiers gathered around him, some clutching wounds, others staring at the fallen elders with a mix of exhaustion and grim satisfaction. He knelt beside Corin's body, his voice low, almost reverent. "You thought us weak. You thought we'd break. Look at us now." He rose, turning to his troops. "This is for Earth, for every soul they took." Silith watched, her glowing eyes dim with grief. She clutched Vera's arm, whispering, "Why didn't they finish us?" Vera's face was a mask of ash and blood, her voice hollow. "Because we're nothing to them now. They've won. We're just ghosts." She laughed bitterly, the sound cracking in her throat. "We warned them. No one listened." A human soldier approached the leader, his armor dented, a crude radio in hand. "Sir, the Unbroken reports the outer districts are secure. Survivors are fleeing, scattered. What's the order?" The leader stared at the flag, its blue and green sphere faded but unbroken. "Let 'em run," he said. "They'll carry the story. Let the galaxy know what happens when you cross us." The soldier nodded and relayed the command, the words crackling through the static. The humans began to move, salvaging what they could. Weapons, tech, pieces of the spire itself. The leader lingered, his gaze drifting to Sylith and Vera. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over them. Sylith flinched, but Vera met his eye, defiant even in defeat. "You'll never hold this place," she spat. "More will come, others, stronger than us." He crouched, his scarred face inches from hers. "Let him try. We've got nothing left to lose, and everything to fight for." He stood, turning away, and barked an order. His troops filed out, dragging their wounded, leaving the war room a mausoleum of their triumph. Sylith helped Vera stand, the spire trembling as the Unbroken ascended. Through the cracked walls they saw human ships dotting the sky, scarred, relentless, unstoppable. The galaxy would hear of this, and it would shudder. The elders had warned them. No one had listened. Now the humans rose from the ashes, a force forged in betrayal and blood, their cry echoing into the void. "For Earth! For the fallen!" The air was thick with the smell of ash and molten steel, a bitter tang that clung to the back of your throat and wouldn't let go. Somewhere in the distance, a low rumble shook the ground. Not thunder, not an earthquake, but the sound of something massive and alien tearing through what was left of Chicago. I stood there, boots sinking into the cracked pavement, staring at the horizon where the sky glowed an unnatural violet. Their ships hovered like bloated ticks, sucking the life out of everything we'd built. 5 years ago, we'd called them saviors. Now, we called them the Ziraki, and we were done begging. I remember the first time I saw one of them up close. It was back when they'd just landed, all shimmering scales and eyes like liquid fire, promising peace and technology beyond our wildest dreams. My sister, Lena, had dragged me to the town square to hear their ambassador speak. "This is it, Jace," she'd said, her voice trembling with hope. "They're going to fix everything. War, hunger, all of it." I'd wanted to believe her. Hell, I did believe her. We all did. They handed out their little miracles, cures for cancer, fusion reactors, crops that grew in deserts, and we ate it up like starving dogs. But Lena's gone now. They took her, like they took so many others, when the masks came off and the real plan showed its teeth. It started slow. Rules crept in. Curfews, quotas, resource contributions. Then the abductions began. People vanished in the night, and the Ziraki said it was for research. Research, that's what they called it when they ripped Lena from our apartment, her screams echoing down the hall as I clawed at the door they'd sealed shut. I beat my fists bloody that night, swearing I'd get her back. But by then, we were already too deep in their grip, too dependent on their tech, too scared to fight. They'd pushed us to our knees and we'd let them, until last week. That's when it snapped. A kid, couldn't have been more than 16, threw a Molotov at one of their patrol drones in New York. The footage spread like wildfire, grainy, shaky, but you could see the flames licking up that sleek alien metal, hear the crowd roar as it crashed. The Ziraki retaliated hard. They leveled half the city, turned it into a smoking crater to teach us a lesson. But instead of breaking us, it lit something feral in our bones. They'd pushed too far, and now we were pushing back. I tightened my grip on the rifle slung over my shoulder, a scavenged piece of human-made steel, not their fancy energy crap. Around me, the camp buzzed with life. Hundreds of us, maybe thousands, gathered in the ruins of an old factory just outside the city. Mechanics welded jagged armor onto beat-up trucks. Kids ran ammo crates to the snipers perched on the roof. An old woman with a scar across her face handed me a canteen, her eyes hard as flint. "Drink," she said. "You'll need it when we hit them tonight." I nodded, swallowing the warm, metallic water, feeling it settle heavy in my gut. The plan was insane. We'd gotten word from a defector, a Zeraki scientist who'd turned on his own kind, slipped us intel about a weak spot in their shield grid. One of their motherships was docked low, siphoning power from what was left of Lake Michigan. If we could overload the grid, crash the shields, we'd have a shot at the ship. Not just to hurt them, but to show them. To show every human still cowering that we weren't done yet, that we could bleed them back. I glanced at the guy next to me, a wiry ex-Marine named Torres. He was sharpening a machete, muttering under his breath about the Zeraki officer he'd gutted last month. "They think we're ants," he said, not looking up. "Let's show 'em ants can bite." I smirked, but it didn't reach my eyes. My mind was on Lena, on the last time I'd seen her, her face pale and defiant as they dragged her away. If she was still alive, she'd be on one of those ships. And if she wasn't, well, I'd make them pay for that too. Night fell fast, the violet sky deepening to black, their ships glowing like cruel stars. We moved out, a ragtag army of the broken and the pissed off, creeping through the rubble toward the lake. The air hummed with their tech, a sound that used to mean progress but now just meant death. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with something hotter, something alive. They'd taken everything, our homes, our families, our hope, but they'd forgotten one thing. Humans don't break easy, and tonight we'd remind them why. The wind off Lake Michigan carried a chill that cut through my jacket, but I barely felt it. My focus was razor sharp, locked on the mothership squatting low over the water like some monstrous insect, its tendrils of light pulsing as they drank from the lake. Up close, it was even uglier than I'd imagined, hulking, jagged, its hull a mess of sharp angles and glowing vents. The shield around it shimmered faintly, a dome of violet energy that buzzed like a swarm of bees. That was our target. That was where their arrogance lived, and we were about to shove it down their throats. Torres crouched beside me, his machete strapped to his back, a jury-rigged grenade launcher in his hands. He nodded toward the defector's coordinates, a relay station half buried in the shore's mud, its cables snaking up to the ship. "That's it," he whispered, his breath fogging in the cold. "Overload that and the whole grid fries." I didn't answer, just checked my rifle's magazine for the 10th time. The weight of it grounded me, kept my hands from shaking. Around us, the others fanned out, shadows in the dark, armed with whatever we'd scraped together. Pipe bombs, hunting rifles, a couple of stolen Zeraki plasma cutters. It wasn't much, but it was ours. The old woman from camp, the one with the scar, took point. Her name was Marta, and she moved like she'd been born for this, silent and sure despite the limp in her left leg. She'd lost her son to the Zeraki research labs a year ago, and the hate in her eyes burned brighter than any of their tech. She signaled us forward, and we crept closer, hugging the ruins of a collapsed pier. The hum of the ship grew louder, vibrating in my chest, and I caught a glimpse of movement, Zeraki sentries patrolling the shore, their long limbs glinting under floodlights. My stomach twisted. If they spotted us before we hit the relay, we were dead. We were 50 yards out when it went wrong. One of the kids, Tommy, a scrawny 13-year-old who'd insisted on coming, tripped over a chunk of concrete. The clatter echoed like a gunshot, and a sentry's head snapped toward us, its eyes flaring red. "Down!" Marta hissed, but it was too late. A beam of light sliced through the dark, and Tommy screamed as it caught him square in the chest. He hit the ground, a smoking hole where his ribs used to be, and the night exploded into chaos. Torres fired first, the grenade launcher coughing out a homemade explosive that arced toward the sentry. It detonated mid-air, showering the thing with shrapnel, and it staggered, shrieking. a sound like metal tearing. I bolted up, rifle barking as I sprayed rounds at the second sentry rushing us. Bullets pinged off its scales, but one caught it in the neck, and black ichor sprayed. It dropped, thrashing, and for a second I thought we might pull this off. Then the ship reacted. A klaxon blared, deafening, and the shield pulsed brighter, throwing off waves of heat. Drones poured from the mothership's underside, sleek, buzzing things with glowing stingers, and the air filled with the whine of their weapons. Marta yelled something I couldn't hear over the noise, and we scattered, diving for cover as beams carved craters into the shore. I slid behind a rusted shipping container, heart slamming against my ribs, and peeked out. The relay was still there, 30 yards away, unguarded in the chaos. We could still do this. "Jace, move!" Torres shouted, lobbing another grenade at the drones. It burst in a fireball, taking 2 of them down, and I ran, legs pumping, lungs burning. The ground shook as the ship fired something bigger, a cannon blast that turned a chunk of the pier into ash. I didn't look back. Couldn't. All I saw was the relay, its control panel flickering in the dark. I slid to my knees beside it, ripping off the cover, and stared at the mess of alien wiring inside. The defector had said red to blue, overload the core. My hands shook as I yanked the red cable free, sparks biting my fingers, and jammed it into the blue slot. Nothing happened. For a heartbeat, I thought we'd failed. Thought Tommy had died for nothing, that Lena was lost forever. Then the relay whined, a high-pitched scream that made my teeth ache, and the shield flickered. Just once, but it was enough. A cheer went up from the others, ragged and wild, and I grinned despite the blood and smoke. The drones faltered, some crashing into the lake, and the sentries froze, confused. We'd cracked their armor, but the ship wasn't done. A shadow loomed as it shifted, rising higher, and a new sound cut through the night. A deep, guttural roar from inside its belly. Something was coming, something big. I gripped my rifle tighter, the grin fading. We'd stung them, sure. Now they were pissed, and whatever they threw at us next, I knew it'd test every ounce of fight we had left. The roar from the mothership grew louder, a bone-rattling growl that made the water in the lake ripple like it was scared too. I stayed crouched by the relay, my hands still tingling from the sparks, watching the shield flicker again. Once, twice, before it stabilized. We'd heard it, but not enough. Not yet. The air thickened with a new kind of heat, something oppressive and alive, and then I saw it. A hatch sliding open on the ship's underside, spilling out a flood of green light. Whatever was coming, it wasn't drones or sentries. It was worse. "Fall back!" Marta yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. She was dragging a wounded guy, some mechanic whose leg was a mess of blood and bone, toward the pier's ruins. Torres fired off another grenade, the blast lighting up the night, but it barely dented the ship. The drones were regrouping, their stingers glowing hotter, and the sentries were back on their feet, closing in. We were pinned, and that hatch was still vomiting light like a wound that wouldn't close. I didn't move. Couldn't. My eyes were locked on the ship, on the shape emerging from that glow. It was massive, twice the size of their sentries. Maybe more. A hulking thing of scales and claws and teeth that gleamed like wet obsidian. Its legs hit the shore with a thud that cracked the earth, and its head swiveled, 4 eyes burning red as they swept over us. A Zeraki war beast. I'd heard rumors, whispers from survivors who'd seen them unleashed on other cities, but seeing it now, up close, turned my guts to ice. This wasn't just a weapon. This was their answer, their way of saying we'd crossed a line they'd never let us uncross. "Jace, get out of there," Torres shouted, but his voice was distant, drowned by the pounding in my ears. The beast took a step, then another, its claws gouging the ground, and I saw something else, figures moving behind it. Ziraki soldiers, armored and armed, fanning out like they were hurting us. They weren't panicking anymore. They were hunting. I scrambled back, rifle up, and fired a burst at the beast. The bullet sparked off its hide, useless as pebbles, and it roared again, a sound that hit me like a punch. I ran then, ducking low as a drone's beam scorched the air where I'd been. The relay was still humming, still alive, and that gave me something to cling to. We'd weakened them. We could still do this. I slid into cover beside Marta, her face smeared with dirt and blood, her eyes blazing. "What the hell is that thing?" I gasped, reloading with fumbling hands. "Doesn't matter," she snapped. "We kill it or we die." She shoved a plasma cutter into my grip, one of the stolen ones, its charge low but still glowing. "Aim for the joints. It's all we've got." I nodded, swallowing the fear, and peeked out. The beast was closer now, tearing through a truck we'd rigged with explosives. The blast rocked it back, but it didn't fall, just shook its head and kept coming, angrier than before. Torres appeared beside us, his launcher empty, machete in hand. "Shield's still up, but it's weak," he said, panting. "We hit that relay again, we might drop it for good." He jerked his chin toward the beast. "Gotta get past that bastard first." I didn't argue. The relay was our shot, our only shot, and if that meant facing down a nightmare, so be it, for Lena, for Tommy, for every one of us they'd crushed. We moved fast, splitting up to confuse it. Marta went left, hobbling but fierce, firing her pistol to draw its attention. Torres took the right, slashing at a sentry that got too close, black blood slicking his blade. I went straight, plasma cutter humming, aiming for the relay. The beast saw me. Those red eyes locked on and charged, faster than something that big should have been. I dove, hitting the mud as its claws raked the air above me, and rolled, coming up with the cutter aimed at its knee. I squeezed the trigger. The beam hit true, a white-hot line that seared through scales and sinew. The beast shrieked, stumbling, and I didn't wait. Sprinted for the relay, my boots slipping in the muck. Behind me, it thrashed, lashing out with a tail I hadn't even seen, and I heard Marta cry out. I didn't look back, couldn't. The relay was there, 10 yards, 5, and I slammed into it, ripping wires free, shoving them anywhere they'd spark. The hum spiked, the shield flickered hard, and then darkness. The violet dome collapsed, exposing the ship's belly, and a ragged cheer rose from the shadows. But the beast wasn't done. I turned just as it lunged, its jaws wide, and I braced for the end. Then Torres was there, screaming, driving his machete into its eye. It reared back, flailing, and I saw Marta limping toward us, blood streaming down her face. We'd dropped the shield. We'd won this round. But the ship was awake now, and the real fight was just beginning. The mothership loomed above us, naked without its shield, its hull a jagged silhouette against the black sky. The air tasted of ozone and blood, and the ground trembled as the war beast thrashed, Torres still clinging to its head, his machete buried deep in its eye. It roared, a wet, guttural sound, and flung him off like he was nothing. He hit the mud hard, rolling to a stop near Marta, who was barely on her feet, one arm hanging useless, her face a mask of pain and fury. I ran to them, the plasma cutter still hot in my hands, its charge flickering out. We'd torn the shield down, but we were running on fumes, and the Ziraki knew it. "Torres!" I yelled, dropping beside him. He groaned, spitting blood, but waved me off, dragging himself up. "I'm fine, Jace. Focus on the ship." His voice was ragged, but his eyes were sharp, locked on the beast as it staggered, half-blind and pissed. Marta grabbed my arm, her grip iron despite the blood soaking her sleeve. "They're coming," she rasped, nodding towards the mothership. She was right. More hatches were opening, spilling out soldiers and drones, their lights cutting through the dark like knives. We'd kicked the hive, and now it was swarming. I glanced at the relay, its guts sparking and smoking. It was dead. Our one trick played out. The ship was vulnerable, but we were exposed too. A handful of broken humans against an army that didn't know mercy. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with something heavier. Regret, maybe, or the weight of every promise I'd made to Lena. I'd told her I'd keep her safe. I'd told her we'd win this. Now here I was, knee-deep in mud and death, and she was still up there, somewhere in that metal hell, if she was even alive. "We hit the ship," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "We take it down, or we take it with us." Torres barked a laugh, short and bitter. "You're insane, kid. I like it." Marta just nodded, her jaw tight, and handed me her pistol. "5 rounds left," she said like it was a gift. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep going, enough to make them bleed. The beast lunged again, slower now, its wounded leg dragging, and we scattered. I fired the pistol, aiming for its remaining eyes, and one shot hit, popping like a blister. It screeched, thrashing blind, and Torres took the chance, slashing its flank with his machete. Marta hobbled toward a fallen drone, wrenching its stinger free, a makeshift spear, glowing faintly. We weren't soldiers, not really, but we fought like we'd been born for this, like every cut and bruise they'd given us had forged something unbreakable. Above us the ship shifted, its engines roaring to life, a deep thrum that shook the shore. It was lifting off, trying to escape now that its shield was gone. Panic flared in my gut, not because it was leaving, but because it might take Lena with it. "No, you don't," I muttered, and broke into a sprint, dodging a drone's beam that scorched the ground behind me. There was a ramp still down, a loading bay where soldiers were pouring out, and I aimed for it, legs burning, breath tearing at my lungs. I didn't know what I'd do if I got there, just that I had to. Torres caught up, swearing under his breath, and Marta wasn't far behind, her limp worse but her eyes wild. "You're gonna get us killed," he shouted, but he didn't stop, matching my pace as we closed in. The ramp was 20 yards away, then 10, and the soldiers saw us, plasma rifles snapping up, firing wild. I ducked, felt heat graze my shoulder, and kept going. 5 yards. 2. I leapt, hitting the ramp hard, rolling to my feet inside the ship's belly. It was chaos. Crates toppling, soldiers shouting in their guttural tongue, the air thick with the stink of fuel and metal. Torres landed beside me, machete ready, and Marta stumbled in, stinger raised like a warrior queen. We were inside now, 3 humans against a fortress, and the ramp started to close behind us. No way out. The beast's roars faded outside, replaced by the hum of the ship's core, a heartbeat of power somewhere deep within. I gripped the pistol, my last 4 rounds, and met Torres's grin with one of my own. "They're gonna regret letting us in," he said, and I believed him. We weren't just ants anymore. We were the fire in their walls, and we'd burn this thing down from the inside, or die trying. The inside of the mothership was a labyrinth of cold metal and pulsing lights, a hive of sharp edges and alien noise that pressed against my skull. I moved fast, pistol in one hand, the other brushing the walls to keep my balance as the floor tilted. The ship was climbing, engines howling. Torres was ahead, machete dripping black from a soldier he'd gutted, its body slumped in a corner. Marta trailed, her stinger sparking, her breath ragged but her eyes fierce. We were invaders now, fleas on a beast too big to notice, but we'd make it feel us. A squad of Ziraki rounded the corridor, rifles glowing, and I fired, 3 shots, 2 hits, their scales cracking as they fell. The last lunged, claws slashing, and Torres met it, his blade sinking into its throat. Keep moving, he barked, shaking blood off his arm. We had no plan, just a direction. Deeper, toward the core's hum, where the ship lived, where Lena might be. The air grew hotter, thicker, the walls vibrating as we pushed through a bulkhead into a cavernous chamber. Towers of machinery loomed, cables snaking like veins, and there it was, the core, a glowing orb of violet energy suspended in a web of conduits. Ziraki techs scurried around it, oblivious until Marta hurled her stinger. It hit, sparking wild, and they scattered, shrieking. Alarms blared, red lights flashing, and I felt the ship shudder. Our chaos was working. "Jace, there!" Torres pointed to a platform above, where a figure stood, taller, armored, its eyes locked on us. An officer. It raised a weapon, and a beam seared past my head, melting steel. I dove, firing my last round, missed, and the officer leapt down, landing with a thud that shook the floor. Torres charged, machete swinging, but it caught his arm, twisting hard. He yelled, blade clattering, and I tackled it, slamming us both into a conduit. Sparks flew, burning my skin, but I held on, clawing at its face. Marta limped in, grabbing Torres's machete, and drove it into the officer's back. It screeched, thrashing, and I shoved it off, panting. The core pulsed faster, unstable, and I saw our chance. "The conduits," I said, voice hoarse. "Break 'em." We attacked, me with the plasma cutter's dying glow, Torres with a scavenged rifle butt, Marta with raw fury. Metal tore, energy arced, and the core whined, a scream that shook the ship. Then I heard it, a voice, faint, human. "Jace?" My heart stopped. Lena, somewhere beyond the core, alive. I turned, ready to run, when the floor buckled, and the ship lurched, falling. We'd done it too well. The core was dying, and so were we, unless we found her fast. The ship was screaming now, a dying giant thrashing in the sky. The core's violet glow flickered wildly, spitting arcs of energy that scorched the walls and floor, and the whole chamber tilted hard, throwing me against a conduit. My shoulder burned where it hit, but I barely felt it. Lena's voice echoed in my head, faint but real, pulling me like a lifeline. She was here, somewhere, and I wasn't leaving without her. The floor buckled again, metal groaning as the ship lost altitude, and I knew we were running out of time. "Jace, we gotta move," Torres yelled, hauling himself up, his arm bent wrong from the officer's grip. Blood streaked his face, but he was still swinging, smashing the rifle butt into another conduit. Sparks rained down, and the core's whine pitched higher, a sound that clawed at my ears. Marta was on her knees, panting, the machete buried in the officer's corpse beside her. She looked half dead, her scar stark against pale skin, but she nodded at me, fierce as ever. "Go find her," she rasped. "We'll finish this." I didn't argue. I bolted past the core, dodging a tech that lunged at me. Its claws grazed my jacket, but I kept running, deeper into the ship. The corridors twisted, narrower here, lined with pods glowing faintly green. My stomach churned as I passed them. Humans floated inside, tubes snaking into their arms, their faces slack. Experiments. Rage boiled up, hot and sharp, but I forced it down. Lena. I had to find Lena. "Lena!" I shouted, my voice cracking over the alarms. The ship lurched again, a violent drop that slammed me into a wall, and I heard it. Her voice, closer now. "Jace, here!" I spun, zeroing in on a pod tucked behind a bulkhead, its glass fogged but her shape unmistakable. She was pounding on it, her dark hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with fear and fight. Alive. She was alive. I ripped at the pod's controls, my hands shaking, tearing wires when the panel wouldn't give. The glass hissed open, and she spilled out, coughing, grabbing my arms like I might vanish. "You're here!" she gasped, voice raw. You're really here!" I pulled her close, her warmth cutting through the cold dread I'd carried too long. But there was no time to feel it. The floor tilted sharper, and a blast of heat roared from the core chamber. Marta and Torres were still at it, breaking everything they could. "We're getting out," I said, dragging her up. She nodded, unsteady but stubborn, the Lena I remembered. We stumbled back toward the chamber, the ship shaking like it was tearing itself apart. The core was a mess of light and smoke now, conduits dangling, and Torres was there, wrestling a soldier off Marta. She was bleeding bad, a gash across her chest, but she swung the machete one last time, splitting a cable that erupted in a fireball. "Ramps that way," Torres shouted, pointing past the chaos. The ship was low now. I could feel it, the pull of gravity winning, and we ran, Lena's hand in mine, Torres half carrying Marta. Soldiers fired, beams slicing the air, but the ship's death throes were on our side, walls collapsing to block their shots. We hit the loading bay, the ramp still cracked open, and outside, the lake rushed up fast, dark and unforgiving. "Jump!" I yelled, and we did. Lena first, then me, Torres shoving Marta out before leaping himself. The cold hit like a fist, water swallowing us as the ship crashed, a deafening roar of metal and fire. I kicked up, breaking the surface, gasping, and saw Lena beside me, alive, real. The mothership sank, its glow fading, and somewhere in the dark I heard Torres laugh, wild and triumphant. We'd done it. We'd struck back. But as I pulled Lena to shore, I knew they'd come for us again, and we'd be ready. The shore was a graveyard of wreckage and mud, the lake lapping at twisted chunks of the mothership that hadn't sunk. Smoke hung thick, stinging my eyes as I dragged Lena onto solid ground, her fingers digging into my arm like she still wasn't sure this was real. She coughed, water dripping from her hair, and I dropped beside her, chest heaving, every muscle screaming. The cold bit deep, but I didn't care. She was here, breathing, her eyes meeting mine with that same fire I'd thought they'd snuffed out. "You're an idiot," she muttered, voice shaky but sharp. "Coming after me like that." "Had to," I said, managing a grin despite the ache in my bones. "You'd do the same." She didn't argue, just squeezed my hand tighter, and for a moment the world shrank to just us. Two kids from a broken city who'd clawed their way back to each other. But the moment didn't last. A groan pulled my head up. Torres, hauling Marta out of the water, her face pale, blood mixing with the mud under her. "She's bad," he said, voice tight. I scrambled over, Lena behind me, and saw the gash across Marta's chest, deep and ugly, her breathing shallow. She'd taken the hit back in the core chamber, kept fighting anyway, and now it was catching up. I pressed my hands to the wound, uselessly trying to stop the bleeding, but she swatted me off, weak but fierce. "Don't!" she rasped. "Did what we came for, that's enough!" "No, it's not," I snapped, anger flaring, at her, at the Ziraki, at everything. "You don't get to quit now." She smirked, a ghost of a laugh rattling out, but her eyes were fading, and I felt it, that helpless twist in my gut. Torres knelt beside her, his busted arm trembling as he gripped her hand. "You're a hell of a fighter, old lady," he said, voice thick. She nodded just once, and then she was gone, her scarred face still defiant even in death. Silence fell, heavy and wrong, broken only by the distant crackle of the sinking ship. Lena's hand found my shoulder, steadying me, and I forced myself up, swallowing the grief. We'd lost too much already. Marta, Tommy, countless others. But we'd hit them hard. The mothership was down, a smoking ruin in the lake, and that meant something. It had to. Torres stood too, wiping blood from his face, his jaw set. "They'll come back," he said, staring at the horizon where the violet sky still glowed. fainter now but not gone. More ships, more of those bastards. He was right. We'd won a battle, not the war, and the Ziraki didn't forgive. Lena shivered beside me, her clothes soaked, but her voice was steady. Then we hit them again, harder. I looked at her, saw the steel in her eyes, and nodded. She'd been inside their labs, seen what they did. She knew the cost better than any of us. "What did they do to you up there?" I asked, quiet, dreading the answer. Her face darkened, lips tightening. "Tests. Pain. They wanted to break us, figure out why we fight." She paused, then met my gaze. "They didn't get it. We don't break. We bend till we snap back." Her words lit something in me, a fire that had been smoldering since they took her. Torres grunted, a grim smile tugging at his mouth. "Damn right. Let's give him more to chew on." We turned from the lake, trudging back toward the camp, the ruins of Chicago looming ahead. The factory buzzed with life as we got close, shouts, cheers, people running out to meet us. They'd seen the ship fall, felt the ground shake, and now they crowded around, dirty faces lit with hope and hunger for more. A mechanic clapped my back, a kid handed Lena a blanket, and someone pressed a canteen into Torres's hand. They asked questions. How'd we do it? What's next? And I saw it in their eyes. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were a spark, and it was spreading. The Ziraki had pushed us too far, and now humanity was striking back, one bloody, defiant step at a time. The camp was a furnace of noise and motion by the time we stumbled in, the factory's rusted walls echoing with voices, some cheering, some shouting orders, all alive with a fire we'd lit. The mothership's fall had ripped through the air like a thunderclap, and now every pair of eyes turned to us, glinting with something I hadn't seen in years. Belief. Not just hope, but the raw, jagged kind that comes when you've got nothing left to lose and everything to take back. Lena clung to the blanket around her shoulders, her face pale but set, while Torres limped beside me, his busted arm tucked close. We were battered, soaked, one less with Marta gone, but we'd done the impossible, and it wasn't over. A crowd parted as we pushed through, and a figure stepped forward. Reyes, a grizzled ex-cop who'd been holding this place together since the Ziraki turned Chicago to ash. His left eye was a milky scar, but the right one burned as he looked us over. "You crazy sons of bitches actually did it," he said, voice rough as gravel. He glanced past us, towards the lake where smoke still curled into the sky. "Ship's down. What's the cost?" "Too much," I said, the weight of Marta's death sinking deeper. But they paid more. Reyes nodded, slow, like he understood the math of blood and loss better than most. He jerked his head toward the factory's heart, where mechanics were already tearing into scavenged Ziraki tech, sparks flying. "Good, 'cause we're not done. Word's spreading. Other cells saw it, out in Detroit, Milwaukee. They're asking what's next." Next. The word hit me like a punch, and I felt Lena tense beside me. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "Next, we don't wait for them to hit us. We take the fight to them, every ship, every base. They think we're weak. We prove we're not." Her words were steady, forged in whatever hell she'd endured up there, and the crowd leaned in, hanging on them. Reyes raised an eyebrow, but a grin tugged at his mouth. "Girl's got teeth. I like it." Torres laughed, a short, sharp sound. "She's right. They'll come hard now. More ships, more of those damn beasts. We hit 'em before they regroup." He flexed his good hand, itching for his machete, and I saw the same hunger in the faces around us. Kids with stolen rifles, old men with pipe bombs, women sharpening scavenged blades. We weren't an army, not by their standards, but we were something meaner, a pack of wolves with nothing left to fear. Reyes clapped a hand on my shoulder, hard enough to jolt me. You started this, Jace. What's your call? I looked at Lena, at Torres, at the sea of battered, defiant humans waiting for a spark to ignite them. My throat tightened, thinking of Marta's last smirk, Tommy's scream, all the graves we dug under their violet sky. We find their nests, I said, voice low but growing. Every ship they've got grounded, every lab they've built, we burn 'em down. They took our world. We take it back, piece by bloody piece. A roar went up, ragged and wild, fists punching the air. Reyes grinned full now, barking orders. Scouts to map Ziraki sites, techs to rig weapons, runners to link with other cells. Lena grabbed my arm, pulling me aside as the chaos swirled. You sure about this? She asked, quiet, her eyes searching mine. It's not just about me anymore. It never was, I said, meeting her gaze. It's about all of us. They pushed too far, Lena. Now they get humanity unleashed. She nodded, a flicker of pride cutting through the exhaustion, and squeezed my hand one last time before turning to join the fight brewing around us. Days later we moved out, hundreds strong, a tide of steel and fury rolling toward the next Ziraki outpost, their violet lights dotting the horizon. The sky rumbled, their ships stirring, but we didn't flinch. We'd lost everything, homes, families, peace, and found something sharper in the wreckage, a will to strike back, to bend and snap and tear until they regretted ever landing here. They'd called us ants, weak, insignificant. Now they'd learn. Humanity wasn't done. We were just getting started.